Building a better Bay Area. Moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC 7 News.
I'm Kristen Z. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Getting Answers live on ABC 7. We ask experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. As more states criminalize gender-affirming care, could California become a refuge for trans kids and their parents? State Senator Scott Wiener is proposing legislation that would help them. He'll join us live to talk about his idea. Also, San Francisco Mayor London Breed is in Europe, marketing the city to European tourists. But who's footing the bill? The answer may surprise you. A reporter with our media partner, the San Francisco Standard, will break it down for us. But first, the Biden administration is stepping up its support of Ukraine a day after President Volodymyr Zelensky made an impassioned plea to Congress for help fighting off the Russian invasion. He ended the speech with a poignant video montage contrasting the peace and happiness in Ukraine before Vladimir Putin invaded and after. Zelensky's presentation was deeply felt by Bay Area Congresswoman Jackie Speier, who's on the House Armed Services Committee. She joins us live now from the Capitol. Congresswoman Speier, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Kristen.
You called Zelensky's speech powerful. What resonated with you the most in his call to action yesterday?
Well, he was Churchillian, really, in how he made the case. I mean, you couldn't hear a pin drop in that huge auditorium. Many people got teary-eyed. I remember watching this little child crying with bombs going off in the background, thinking, what a horrendous crime against humanity that Vladimir Putin has created. And I think President Zelensky has done a masterful job of making his case, not just to the American people, but to our allies around Europe. And we're opening our pocketbooks to make sure he has every weapon he needs to repel the Russian military.
I want to get into that a little bit more because, as you said, President Biden answered the call with another $800 million more in military aid. Tell us about the most significant items in this new package and how Ukraine could use them.
So what's very good about many of these weapon systems is that they're very mobile. So it's not like having to cart heavy equipment across Poland's border. So they're javelins and stingers. There's also a great deal. There's a new particular drone that can be very effective. It's called Switchblade, and it can target up to 50 miles away. It's very lightweight. It's about 5 pounds and very mobile. So those weapon systems, in addition to 5,000 to 6,000 more pistols, rifles, guns, the body armor, the helmets, we will give them what they need. Now, there's some of us who would suggest that we should also get jets to them so that they can fight them in the air. That becomes logistically more difficult, but when I see what is happening to that country, it is being turned into just rubble. And as many of these Ukrainians who have fled have said, there's nowhere to go home to. My home is gone. The schools are gone. I mean, we're going to see millions upon millions of Ukrainians that are going to be refugees in countries throughout Europe.
Yeah, the destruction and Putin's scorched earth approach has certainly been intensified in the past few days, and we've certainly seen that in the videos. You've really tried to call attention to the devastation this has caused Ukrainian women and children. Can you talk about that?
Well, we're celebrating National Women's History Month, and we were asked to, highlight someone that we were really very proud of. And I highlighted the Ukrainian women who have stood up in ways that, frankly, I don't know if we would see that in our country. They have 22% of their military that is female. In the United States, it's more like 18%. And these women are braving horrendous circumstances to take their children and to flee the country to someplace that they know nothing about. No home is guaranteed. And yet we can thank the Polish government, the Romanian government, and so many others for making a pathway for them. So I also highlighted some of the Russian women who are very angry at the fact that 6,000 of their sons have come back in body bags. And one of the Russian women got on the main TV station in Russia with a sign that says, "Stop this war, don't listen to the propaganda." Now she's being charged with some crime and may spend 15 years in jail.
I mean, the toll is already devastating. I want to ask you, though, President Zelensky's biggest ask is for the U.S. and NATO to enforce a no-fly zone. Do you think the U.S. is moving any closer to even considering that?
So a no-fly zone equates with war by the United States with Russia.
Because you have to be prepared to enforce it, right, and shoot down any Russian aircraft that gets into that airspace.
So if we can provide them the military equipment to do it themselves, all the better. What we have learned from all of this is that Russia has a very weak military. They only spend about $60 billion a year on their military to our $740 billion. And so I think the reason why so many of these convoys haven't been effective is because the biggest costs in a military is training and maintenance. So they haven't been properly trained, and I think the reason why we haven't seen more of their aircraft in the air is because they are not maintained. So I think the fact that Kyiv is still standing says volumes about the Ukrainian people, but we've got to find a ceasefire pathway. We've got to find some way for Putin to be able to say he won and repel him out of the country and allow the Ukrainian to regain their country.
And what might they look like? First of all, that's just a difficult concept to swallow, to find a way to allow Putin to claim a win, so to speak?
So there is some conversations going on now that are diplomatic in nature between the Ukrainian leadership and the Russian leadership. One thing that's been floated is that Ukraine will not would not engage in any kind of effort to become part of NATO. And then there would be an effort to give Russia, this was what we're hearing from Putin's organization, Crimea and the Donbass area. So that might be harder for the President Zelensky to swallow. But the hardest thing for him to swallow was to demilitarize Ukraine, which, why would they do that? Why would they allow themselves to be vulnerable like that? So I'm not sure how the negotiations are going to go, but, you know, continuing to bomb these communities. There was a school and a community center bombed today with more than 20 civilians who were killed, and the horrific deaths of some of these Ukrainian women and their children are going to haunt me certainly for the rest of my life.
You know, Congresswoman Speier, when this first occurred, when Russia first invaded, there were few experts that gave Ukraine a chance at all. Most experts we talked to said it looks to be too late for them. But 3 weeks in, they're still standing. Do you think the odds have changed in Ukraine's favor?
Well, our intelligence suggested that Kyiv would fall in 3 days because they had that convoy that surrounded them. And the Ukrainian military was very smart. They blew up their own bridges, and they used the missiles they had to, you know, blow up good parts of the convoy. And then they lied in wait as the convoy was coming down the road and took them out as well. So the ground war is not working for Putin. And that's why he has now moved to just trying to blow up all of these cities and anyone who's there. So I do give them a greater chance of succeeding, but it's still going to be quite difficult.
All right. I want to move on and talk about something that's very important in the Bay Area right now as well. San Mateo County looks to be on track to becoming the first Bay Area county to reduce its unsheltered homeless population basically, effectively, to zero. What is the approach? What is the county doing?
Well, I will give the County Board of Supervisors and the county manager, Mike Callaghy, credit for taking the federal dollars that we made available through Room Key and Home Key, and they bought hotels. And they've been able to, with a turnkey approach in one situation, make that available, some 91 units to senior homeless people. And all the furniture was already there because they were suites. And some are 1 bedroom, some are 2 bedroom. We went and visited seniors who were living in their cars and who are now housed in that particular building called Shores Landing. And then on the coast, there was another hotel, motel, that was transferred to the county. And also, again, they rehabbed it and it's now available to homeless people. So yes, functional zero is in the cards for San Mateo County this year because the county acted so effectively, efficiently, and swiftly to purchase these hotels.
But I have to ask you, though, the state and San Francisco, for example, are signaling that they're kind of done with arguing if it's okay for people to stay on the streets when there is a place for them to go, that sometimes treatment needs to be mandated. Sometimes people can't decide for themselves. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I actually am one of those that believes that everyone should be sheltered. There should be a roof over everyone's head. And we know that if you have a roof over your head, if you can wrap around services like a free health clinic or substance abuse program, or just support services, that people feel safe. They have a key, they can close their door, they can have their belongings in their home. It is the way we should be moving forward. And I'm one of those that falls in that category.
Congresswoman Jackie Speier, always great talking with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kristen.
And we'll be right back with State Senator Scott Wiener to talk about new legislation that would make California a refuge for transgender children from other states. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, stick around. We'll be back with Senator Scott Wiener. Transgender children and teens from states where gender-affirming care is being criminalized may soon consider California a safe haven. That's because today, State Senator Scott Wiener announced new legislation that he will soon co-author and co-introduce that will provide these children and their families refuge. Senator Wiener joins us live now to talk about it. Senator Wiener, give us the context of what's happening in cities across the country that has trans teens and their families alarmed.
It's really scary. We have states, for example, in Texas, the governor announced that if parents provide or allow access for their trans kids to get gender-affirming health care, the parents would be arrested and put in prison. and the kids would be taken away and put into foster care. We have other states where parents are being threatened with life in prison for supporting their trans kids and allowing them to get gender-affirming health care. It's really terrifying, and it's really a campaign to terrorize these parents. And for these kids, it's sending a message that because of who you are, your parents are going to jail and you're going to foster care. So California will never be a party to that. And what we're concerned about is you could have families where Texas or Idaho or Louisiana or some of the other states that are doing this are trying to take these kids away from their parents. And what we're going to say is that California will not recognize those court judgments removing those kids or subpoenas for medical records.
All right. Is there also an element of not prioritizing arrests of those parents?
Yeah. So if under the U.S. Constitution, if a state issues an arrest warrant for someone, another state is required typically to honor that arrest warrant and extradite them. And California, under this proposal, will deprioritize those arrests.
Got it. Can you define what gender-affirming treatment entails?
Sure. For when we're talking about minors, it's typically, this is when a child is saying, I was born biologically, let's say as a male, but I'm a girl. There's all sorts of healthcare that goes into that, including working on a mental health level with therapists and other mental health experts. Nothing is rushed. And then there are also medications that can delay puberty to create more space for the young person to figure out, what they need and what they want, and to work with their medical providers. And that is totally reversible, so it doesn't harm the child. And then there are potentially hormones depending on the medical care. This is all working with physicians and other professionals. And it's not really about surgery. Surgery is really for what happens more with adults. Teenagers it's very rare that surgery would happen.
Got it. Look, even before this wave of laws to make some of that care that you were talking about a criminal act in some of those states, aren't there already additional stressors on trans youth in terms of their mental health and health?
Yeah, I mean, LGBT youth in general, and particularly trans youth, are constantly receiving messages that they're not full human beings, that they're faking it, that they are predators. We see this with laws saying that trans children are not allowed to use the restroom that corresponds to their gender identity, or that they're not allowed to play sports corresponding to their gender identity. We see laws prohibiting teachers from even talking to these kids about their gender identity. And so these kids are receiving this barrage of negative messaging from political leaders, telling them that they are not real, that they're fake, that they are a problem. And that creates enormous mental and psychological stress for these kids. And so LGBTQ kids in general have higher rates of attempting suicide. And that is because they are at times shunned by their own families, they're shunned by their communities, and they receive these horrible negative messages from elected officials. So we need to support these kids and embrace them and make clear to them that we support them and that we love them and that we have their backs.
What type of reception are you getting from your colleagues, from the kids, I guess, the kids in these states? Have they talked to you?
We're getting very positive reception. I have a number of colleagues who come up to me and enthusiastically expressed support. They're horrified about what's going on in Texas and these other states. We have strong advocacy support from Planned Parenthood, from Equality California, from other organizations. And we, have a lot of families. I mean, I found people, just parents who have come up to me, because I've been very vocal about this issue, and thanked me and thanked the legislature for focusing on this, because they parents who have trans kids here in California, and they feel very lucky that they live in a supportive community, and they're very scared for these families in Texas or Arizona, Louisiana, and so forth, who are literally being threatened with criminal prosecution and losing their children. Why? Because they're supporting and affirming who their children are.
Senator Wiener, we are out of time, so just in 5 seconds, when will this be introduced?
In the next 3 to 4 weeks, I would say.
Okay.
And then we'll bring it to committee.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you then. Thank you so much, Senator Scott Wiener. Coming up next, San Francisco Mayor London Breed is on a 10-day trip abroad promoting tourism to the city. The price tag, $25,000 for the trip. So who's footing the bill? The San Francisco Standard will join us with the answer. All right, everybody, stick around for our next guest. This is very interesting, so don't go away. ABC7 is excited about our partnership with the digital news site, the San Francisco Standard. The Standard's focus on hyper-local quality of life issues aligns with ABC7's efforts to build a better Bay Area. One of those topics is reviving the economy. This week, San Francisco Mayor London Breed is in Europe, marketing the city by the Bay as a great place to visit and do business. Joining us live now to talk about this is the Standard's news editor, Annie Gauss. Annie, great to see you again. It's been a while.
Great to see you too. Yeah, good to be back.
All right, so we know the mayor is on a whirlwind trip to several major European cities to pitch San Francisco as the ultimate destination. But who's paying for the trip and how much does the trip cost?
Yeah, well, this is a 10-day mission, a $25,000 trip where the mayor will be joined by a few members of her staff as well as some leaders in the travel and tourism industry in the city. She'll be visiting London, Paris, Frankfurt, and Brussels. And the mission of this trip is to promote tourism, get visitors back to the city, and to promote a positive image of San Francisco.
Okay, so $25,000 trip, right? Where does that come from? What bucket does it come out of?
Yeah, so San Francisco International Airport is footing the bill for this trip. And as opposed to the city's general fund, which is the general pool of money that funds all our municipal services. And the reason they're paying for this trip is because SFO is what's considered an enterprise department of the city, meaning they function like a business, they fund their own operations through revenue. So the airport itself has an interest in bringing tourism back because they need that revenue as well as the city at large.
Got it. So kind of like a marketing budget, is that right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. All right. The rationale being that the mayor could drum up business, right, and then increase the revenue for SFO and the airlines that operate out of here. Okay. Why do you think she has targeted Europe?
Yeah, well, the reason for that is that relative to other parts of the world, Europe has pretty high vaccination rates, and as a result, most countries in Europe have limited or no restrictions on travel at this point. So people in those countries have the ability to come back and visit San Francisco, and that's not the case in certain parts of Asia, for example. So they're seeing this as kind of the next frontier to bring tourists back. International tourism is also particularly important to the city. International travelers tend to spend more money at the city and in the city and at the airport. So they're really focusing on getting those travelers in particular back to the city.
Ah, got it. Okay, so one international traveler brings in more revenue ultimately than one domestic traveler. Makes sense. I also just curious, SFO, what else have they funded that may surprise people in addition to these kind of official trips? Anything else you've come across?
Yeah, well, one thing to note is that they contribute directly a $45 million service fee to the city's own budget every year. But also, more importantly, the airport itself just generates a ton of business activity for the city. I mean, they're the gateway for the city, and travel and tourism, as we've kind of seen as this pandemic has unfolded, is incredibly important to the city. It supports tens of thousands of jobs. It generates, probably if you totaled it all up, on the order of billions in tax revenue. So it's no surprise that the mayor's office sees this as such a top priority to kind of get this going again.
Right. And as your article mentioned, it's been way down the past 2 years due to the pandemic, SFO's revenue, and then therefore corresponding revenue to the city. What would be a win then for the mayor on this trip? Like, what concrete deals could she bring home,
Yeah, well, one of the specific goals, for example, is she's meeting with leaders at airports and at airlines, and one of her objectives is to increase the frequency of flights to the city, and to kind of in general promote it as a travel gateway to California and to the United States. She's also hoping to promote, a more positive image of the city. She'll be doing some media interviews in some of these cities. As we've seen, the city has taken some shall we say, reputational blows, as of late. So she's hoping to, ameliorate concerns people may have about traveling to the city. And so, those are two of her top goals that she'll probably be hoping to accomplish.
All right, Annie Gauss, great talking with you. Thank you so much for that interesting story. And we have links to the San Francisco Standard's other original reporting on our website, abc7news.com, to watch more ABC7 segments featuring the San Francisco Standard's city-focused journalism. Check out our ABC7 Bay Area streaming TV app and scroll down to the SF Standard shelf. We'll be right back.
Commercial break.
All right. Hey, you're still there, Annie.
Yeah.
Hey, okay, so I also wanted to revisit, because it's been a while since we've had you on, and the last time was when you did that great series about Assembly District Seat 17 in San Francisco, and of course now we have the runoff between Haney and Campos. So I'm wondering, are you still on that? And if you are, maybe give us the latest on, where things are at with that race.
Yeah, well, gosh, that's coming up. I've been gone a while, but early voting starts next week, so we're going to be starting to see results very, very soon on that. We should be, I believe, we should be able to see some early voting results, in the coming days, and we'll be covering those early results as well. The race, according to the last polls that I've seen, it looks pretty tight. I think some folks are of the mind that Matt Haney will end up being the winner, but we'll just have to see how it shakes out. Early voting, as I mentioned, starts next week, but the official election day is April 19th. So there'll be a lot to track over the next few weeks on that race.
Yeah, no, that's coming right up. All right, Annie, great seeing you. Great talking with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. All right, we'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers today. We'll be here every weekday at 3 on air and on live stream answering your questions. World News Tonight is coming up next. Have a great day.